Howdy, readers. I'm Jason. This is Chapter and Verse, and this is another two-shelf tour. So on this bookcase, we have one more shelf of fiction at the very bottom, but at the top here, this is where Kelly and I keep our poetry. So I thought I would start with the poetry and end with the bottom shelf of fiction. So let's jump right into this, shall we? So the two books that I'm going to highlight on this shelf, the first one, and I put it at the top for easy access here. This is, let's see, can you see here? This is In the Dark Before Dawn, New Selected Poems of Thomas Merton. So people don't tend to think of Thomas Merton as a poet. They don't tend to remember him as a poet. This was published by New Directions. And he is best known for his kind of reflective monastic works, but I really love his poetry. And I was going to read just a few stanzas from one of his poems to you right now. Songs of the lions and whales, with my pen between my fingers, making the water world sing. Sweet Christ, discover diamonds and sapphires in my verse, while I burn the sap of my pine house for the praise of the ocean sun. I have walked upon the surf, rinsing the bays with thy hymns. My prayers have swept the horizons clean of ships and rain. All the waters are slick as lacquer. Upon these polished swells my feet no longer run, sliding all over the waves I come to the hope of a slippery harbor. The dogs have gone back to their ghosts and the many lions home, but words fling wide the windows of their glassy houses. Then Adam and Eve come out and walk along the coast, praising the tears of the sun, while I am decorating with thy rubies the bones of the autumn trees, the bones of the homecoming world. Another poem that I want to just bring to your attention in this collection, God, it's a weird angle here, is Original Child Bomb. And I'll just say this. If you are someone who believes that the dropping of the atomic bombs were necessary and instrumental in bringing about the end of World War II, I would encourage you to read Merton's poem, Original Child Bomb. It might just adjust your view of that a little bit. And then the other book I wanted to showcase, so if you'll see here, we have duplicates. Okay, so we have 2 copies of Turtle Island by Gary Snyder. We have 2 copies of Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke. And the reason for this is that when Kelly and I first started dating, we went on a book buying spree one night at Barnes & Noble. And some of the books that she bought were books that I already owned, because we weren't thinking about, oh, well, if we get married someday, we're not going to want to do that. The reason that we kept my old Turtle Island when we got her new Turtle Island is because of this. So I got this at the Salvation Army in Laramie, Wyoming when I was in college. I got it for 5 cents. And if you look inside, so first of all, we have this. A Festival of Contemporary American Poetry, April 18th through the 20th, 1979. Okay? And I can't tell, I think that these are the actual signatures of the poets who were there. But if you look inside, we have, let's see, Gary Snyder's signature with a little figure, it looks like a little flute player or something that he drew beneath his signature. So that was the best find that I have ever come across at a charity shop. Johnny Keene finds amazing books at charity shops all the time. I never do. One really never does in Wyoming. But I did in college, and I about had a heart attack when I found this. So, yeah, it was like 5 cents. And then lastly on this shelf, I just wanted to show you guys. This is the chapbook of poetry that I did in college. And I was, I think, 22 at the time. This was called The Seraphic Body, Poems by Jason Cooper. And I just wanted to read one of them to you. So this poem that I wrote, this is called Canticle. And I submitted it to the New Yorker. I submitted a lot of poems to the New Yorker. And this got a handwritten response, a handwritten rejection, I should say. And it's the only submission that I ever sent anywhere that got a handwritten rejection. The fact that it was from the New Yorker made me very, very proud. The gospel leans and groans like a pillar of thunder. It is all-knowing in its diction. The sky is darker than before, and our minds are lost in storms, and we can no longer speak, for the calm of gray is too much. The prophets were mad and mad and mad. I am a word, the sun over the water, and I watch the water go cold in its font. The waves break like mountains, and the words are there. The mandala is lost in the tide. Its sands write new poems. During the sermon, I listen to the low pulse of thunder. I listen to the rain. So that's our poetry shelf. And this is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth shelf of fiction, the fifth and final shelf of fiction on this bookcase. So I just wanted to share a couple of books from here. So the first one I'm going to talk about is this one here. And this is In the Lake of the Woods by Tim O'Brien. Now, I have not read this. I have read O'Brien's books, The Things They Carried and Going After Cacciato, both of which I love. Going After Cacciato has been kind of described almost as a kind of Vietnam version of Moby Dick. I don't know about that, but it's a tremendous book. I wanted to showcase this one, though, even though I haven't read it, for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to ask you guys if you've ever read it, and if so, what did you think of it? Spoiler-free comments, of course, but also because I read in an interview once with Tim O'Brien that he considered this his best book. He thought this was his best book. And I feel like that's really saying a lot, given that he won the National Book Award for Going After Cacciato, and he was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for The Things They Carried. It probably should have won the Pulitzer Prize. But this is a book of his that people don't really talk about very much. And I always find it fascinating to find out what a writer thinks is his or her best book. For instance, Mansfield Park. Jane Austen thought that was her best book. That's one of her novels that just doesn't get discussed nearly as much these hundreds of years later as Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility or even Emma. I would say of the major novels of hers, only Northanger Abbey kind of falls by the wayside more. But if Jane Austen thought Mansfield Park was her best, maybe the rest of us are missing something. Maybe we're not seeing what she was seeing in it. And maybe that's true of In the Lake of the Woods as well. So if you've read this, let me know what you think. And then the other book I'm going to share with you guys is another one that I have not read, which is unusual for me to do two books from one shelf that I haven't read before. But I'm curious to know if any of you have read this as well. And this is called Landscape Painted with Tea by Milorad Pavic. This was given to me for Christmas by one of our book club members and one of my oldest, dearest friends many, many years ago. This was right before Kelly and I started dating, I think in 2004 when I was given this book. So it's been 14 years, and I still haven't read it. But if we look inside, I will just read you a little bit from the dust jacket flap. It says, Landscape Painted with Tea begins with the story of a brilliant but failed architect in Belgrade and his search for his father, an officer who vanished in Greece during World War II. The truth about his fate, some of it set in motion 2,000 years ago and some of it by the Nazis, is raveled in the history and secrets of Mount Athos, the most ancient of all monasteries, perched atop its inaccessible mountain on the Aegean. As the search opens out in myriad directions, we suddenly find ourselves deep in the midst of the real crossword, whose tantalizing real clues lead us along a new path of discovery. The solution dazzles, and along the way stories, parables, dialogues, wickednesses, sleights of hand, and jokes enchant us. In a novel that is pure Pavic, this time an even more extraordinary mixture of the brilliant, the affectionate, and the outrageous. So, I just really don't know very much about this book, but I love the title. I've always loved the title, and I'm curious to know if any of you have read it, or anything else by Pavic for that matter. So, hope I'm saying his name right there. But anyway, that's what I wanted to do with this shelf, was to kind of pick your brains a little bit and see if any of you have read either the Tim O'Brien or this Milorad Pavic novel. So thanks for joining me. Look for the first of the Q&A videos to go up in the next couple of days. And I will see you guys later. Adios.